Hello, everybody. Welcome to AP English Language. Today we'll be going over raising your sophistication score. You'll see me on our Fiveable TikTok at Think Fiveable. You'll see some great reminders for upcoming streams, trivia games on our Twitter and Instagram pages. We're also uploading some of our previous replays onto YouTube. More information on that should come out closer and closer to the AP exam. So glad to see a lot of y'all from the last few weeks. I hope Kevin Steinhauser's streams in the last 2 weeks about raising your evidence and commentary scores were helpful because those are really, really important to remember. 2/3 of your exam score this year will literally come from your body paragraphs and your evidence and commentary. So if you weren't able to make our live streams in the last 2 weeks, remember, at Fiveable, all of our replays are free. So if you go to app.fiveable.me/aplang, hi Perla, you'll be able to watch some of our old streams about evidence and commentary. Sophistication isn't something that I can spend a lot of time on, and it's kind of in that line where I don't want to spend like an hour and 15 minutes reading all of y'all like giving sophistication paragraphs per se versus like a 30-minute live stream where I just talk about what the rubric is. So I found kind of a medium where we're basically going to talk about the different ways for you to earn sophistication. Then what we're going to actually practice in today's live review is choosing the best way to earn the sophistication point rather than like writing sophistication, just because we'll run out of time. And also it's a very time-intensive process to write like a sophistication paragraph, arguably. And throughout today's live stream, we'll have a Q&A. So you can ask me any questions about Fiveable, the AP exam, other AP classes. And yeah, should be super exciting. It should be pretty straightforward and to the point. So let's look at the rubric for sophistication. So as many of you might have remembered, the AP exam is structured this year in a 45-minute online format where we're just writing one essay, the rhetorical analysis essay. So all we care about is sophistication for rhetorical analysis, at least for today. And as you can see, there are a lot of ways that you cannot earn sophistication. So if you only hint or suggest other arguments, if you oversimplify complexities, if you use redundant sentences or sentences that are too complicated and don't enhance your analysis, you won't get sophistication. Also, attempts at generalizing instead of contextualizing will not earn you sophistication. And moreover, we see that there's really 3 categories that College Board has said that you can earn the sophistication point. The first way is explaining the significance or relevance of the writer's rhetorical choices. The second way is explaining a purpose or function of the passage's complexities or tensions. And the third way is employing a style that is consistently vivid and persuasive. So something I also noticed while reading through some of the different scoring guidelines. So basically what College Board did is when they released this new 141 6-point rubric, they graded the last 2 years essays using the new rubric. And what I found is that a lot of students didn't earn sophistication because they didn't talk about how the rhetorical devices work together in tandem. They kind of just talked about each rhetorical device individually. And so you really need to make sure that you are talking about how the rhetorical devices all together, they kind of, you know, it's almost like a synthesis essay, and that each rhetorical device contributes to that pattern of trying to, you know, make the author's argument more convincing and, you know, contribute to the author's purpose as a whole. Moreover, a lot of students get docked and don't get sophistication because they have non-repetitive sentence structure. And that's what really hurts. If your sentences look the exact same, and when you read out loud your sentences, they sound the exact same, you're probably not going to earn the sophistication point. And finally, make sure that you are contextualizing outside of the prompt. By using like words or phrases inside the speech, for instance, and using that as context, that will not garner enough, I guess, that will only be classified as an attempt rather than actual contextualization. So you want to bring in stuff from the bigger picture, from the outside world, in order to really earn, to kind of get contextualization, I guess, a broader significance of the writer's rhetorical choices. But I think, honestly, there are 4 key words that That's 5. I can't count. There are 5 keywords that are super important when we talk about sophistication, and that is part of the student's argument or part of your argument. That's 4 words, right? And what that means is that you cannot just have a sentence or two of trying to check one of those 3 boxes and assume that you'll get sophistication. What it means to be sophisticated is that you constantly have to be adding, elements of that sophistication in your body paragraphs, if at all possible, in your intro and your conclusion. That kind of answers your question there, Perla. Is it better for us to spend time in the conclusion trying to get context or proofreading our essay? I think if you want a guarantee, actually, it's not even a guarantee, but if you want your best shot at earning sophistication, you are constantly incorporating it in both your introduction paragraph and your body paragraphs. And I think it's also helpful to put it in the conclusion to kind of wrap up your essay. But proofreading your essay is also important. So try and balance both. Do what I saw through our poll that I pushed out that, the overwhelming majority, 6 out of 10, 60% of students, the last time they wrote a rhetorical analysis essay was a month ago. And so if that's the case, you need to be making sure that you're doing what you're familiar with, but also making sure that you know what you're familiar with. So that means from now until the AP exam, make sure that, you make an attempt at trying to write a full rhetorical analysis essay. And I know that sounds insane. It's quarantine. We're all tired. I get it. But that's the way that you can kind of prepare yourself for the real AP exam by knowing what's comfortable for you and then doing that in May. And I saw another question earlier at the beginning of the live stream. How do you cite a sentence or a device used in the text? What I would do, the person, Anna, is essentially I would embed quotes. And I don't have a lot of time to explain how to embed a quote, but we have a lovely, I think 3 weeks ago, I live streamed on how to embed quotes. And if I can find it here, I will send the link in the chat. And I highly recommend you watch that live review on how you can effectively cite a text, cite a device or a specific sentence from, I guess, like a speech or something that you're analyzing rhetorically. So let me send you that live review in the chat here. Oh, we actually have 2. I'm going to send you the one actually from Justin Azario. He did this in November, embedding quotes in rhetorical analysis. That's good stuff. And Perla, I completely relate. I did a statistics free response question at like 4 a.m. last night. I bet Jerry Koskov thinks I'm insane. The guy who leads the AP statistics cram teacher. He's a great guy. Anna, I sent it in the chat, embedding quotes in rhetorical analysis. Great live stream. Okay, so let's go through each category. So let's first talk about the significance or relevance of the writer's rhetorical choices given the rhetorical situation. So I'm actually going to start off with a question. I want you to answer in the chat honestly. Don't Google it. Don't try and do any shenanigans. But what is the rhetorical situation? Just answer what you know. You don't have to be completely right. This isn't the AP test. What is the rhetorical situation? Just go ahead and answer in the Crowdcast chat. Or in the chat in the stream. Author, audience, purpose. Okay. The topic the author uses devices to address. Let's keep going. I want to see. There's 17 people here. So one of the things I really love about Fiveable, as opposed to something like, actually, I'm not going to name other competitors, but I'd say what stands out about Fiveable is that we're able to have a conversation as opposed to, some of the YouTube reviews where I'm able to answer your questions. I want to, make this as interactive as possible because especially during quarantine, I think it's great to have like a friendly face who can answer your questions about your different AP subjects. So, participation makes it more fun for me and fun for you. So it's always great if, we kind of have like a conversation while learning per se. And yeah, I've seen a lot of great answers here. Author, audience, purpose, the argument the author makes, exigence, audience, purpose, speaker, the aspects of the prompt, audience, speaker, purpose, exigence, context, topic, and strategies. And I know that on the left-hand side, there's this like or right here, actually, there's like a diagram, and that is a way to describe the rhetorical situation. My definition is always exigence, purpose, audience, writer, context, and message. So I have 5 aspects, although I know there's the rhetorical triangle. Exigence is really, really important. Exigence, remember, is the reason, or it's why the author was motivated to write the text. It's the urgency that caused the author to pick up their pen and paper and start writing their speech or whatever. It's sort of tied to context, I'd say. And so context, remember, is what was happening during that time period, what was occurring. Message is what the author is trying to convey or communicate. Purpose is what the author is trying to get the audience to do. And obviously the audience and the writer are the audience and the writer. So Nikki, I would say the rhetorical situation is how the different elements of writing kind of interact. So exigence, purpose, audience, writer, context, and message, they're all linked together. So that's what I would call the rhetorical situation. You will never be asked to define what the rhetorical situation is, not even in multiple choice. So it's not that important. But the reason why I ask is because I want everyone to know that every single element is important in crafting this sophistication, crafting the significance and relevance. So whenever I was reviewing some of the previously graded free response questions on this 141 rubric, I don't know how to find exigence. Usually, Anika, I think it would be written, in that paragraph above the prompt. They'll usually talk about why the author wrote the text. If not, you can kind of make a good guess. Like if you see a women's rights speech, the exigence is probably because women did not have the right to vote. And so that not only is the context, but is also the exigence, the reason, the motivation behind the author writing the text is usually located in the context. Like last year's speech was about Gandhi, that I wrote a rhetorical analysis essay for. So I would say the exigence was about how the British were trying to shut down people's attempts at, having freedom and rights. So that's how I would find exigence per se. It's not something that's concrete. It's something that you kind of have to either assume or it's told to you. So whenever I was looking at the ways people earned the sophistication point with this category, I saw that a lot of people brought in context, and that's context outside of what is given. So on the Gandhi text, you could say something about how the British's colonization, so some ties to AP World History if you took that last year, or AP US History if it's an American speaker. You can definitely tie in a lot of your history, but remember, this is not like a DBQ or an LEQ where contextualization is the 2 sentences before your thesis. I don't think that would earn you the sophistication point. It might, depending on how your AP grader grades. But to be safe, I think you need to constantly tie in your essay into that context. I think that's the best way that you can earn this relevance and significance point. In addition, you can explain implications and give kind of complex explanations. And so what that means is that you can talk about how there are, different things that the writer does in their rhetorical choices that are significant. You can talk about the ultimate result. Why does this passage matter? Why did their choice of diction, emotional diction that was melancholy, why does that matter at the end of the day? That's what you need to be answering with the significance and relevance question. So I know I talked very big picture here, so let's go a little bit more into depth in terms of specifics. So here, this was one of the samples that was published in terms of our significance and relevance. So as you can see here, that third sentence here that talks about how the glass ceiling remains unbroken and women continue to fight on all fronts for rights they deserve, rights that should be inherent. And they talk about Madeleine Albright's speech. I wrote an essay for this, and I definitely didn't talk about that, but it's something that you can bring in. How do you find context for non-history? Anika, I would say that precedent shows in the last 5 to 6 years or so of AP Lang rhetorical analysis prompts that most of those prompts come from history. They come from a historical background. I think maybe a few years ago, there was one that was science related. And even then you can probably tie it into something scientific during that. Everything is technically historically based because all of the rhetorical analysis prompts will typically be of like the 20th, 19th, 18th centuries. Does that make sense? So you can usually always find context from the time period. If not, if you give me like an example, I'd be happy to kind of, talk about an example context. Anyways, I would say that this technically, like these 3 sentences, I know I just said, don't just put 2 sentences before your thesis and call it a day. In this instance, the AP graders did give this student sophistication. They said that that use of the glass ceiling remains unbroken and women continue to fight on all fronts for rights they deserve, rights that should be inherent, that it presented a complex understanding of the rhetorical situation. They also said that it explained the significance of the writer's rhetorical choices. So I would say that this is good, but to make your sophistication even better, in every single one of your body paragraphs, after you mention a rhetorical device, whether that's anaphora or metaphor or an appeal to logic, tie it back into the significance, tie it back to the glass ceiling remaining unbroken and how women have to fight for rights that they deserve that are inherent. So in this instance, I would say that they're talking here kind of about context. They're talking about the audience, the purpose, the exigence. It's all kind of tied in. So Shannon asked, what rhetorical tool did this writer use? So if you look at their thesis statement, they talked about contrasts of hypotheticals and reality. So that's kind of like a juxtaposition, providing anecdotes and examples, repetition of the word persevere, which is sort of like anaphora, although it might just be repetition in that instance. Those are all examples of rhetorical devices that the writer used. Perla asks, if you don't really write in fancy language, will you not get the point? The answer is no. No, you will not get the point. So you don't need to have an impressive sounding style to get the sophistication point. You can get the sophistication point without fancy language. Sorry if that confused you. And I'll get into that a little bit later. But I think, bringing in context before your thesis and then tying in that context throughout every single one of your rhetorical devices, that's a pretty sure, fast way to earn sophistication. But I think arguably there are easier ways. We'll see that in a bit. And so we saw that student did that almost exactly. So in this instance, in sample 1 here, they talked about how Albright, she knows that these graduates in their struggle for equality will face resistance, ridicule, distraction. Some will concede, others will struggle onwards with diminished fervor. So here we see that there's a tie-in to how women continue to fight for things. They face resistance, they face ridicule. And as you can see, by linking your rhetorical devices to that context, it really helps the AP grader kind of clearly see, oh, that's sophisticated writing. And then later on, we can see that the writer says, like, walking away from college. And I think that's right over here under Albright successfully relates. It says, walking away from college, they will remember to persevere in the face of opposition, that perseverance is the key to continued struggle. And that, once again, is like almost a direct link back to that context. So Anika says, so you need to identify what device is being used in the beginning, middle, and end. Anika, I'm not too sure what you're asking. I would say that in your thesis statement, it's useful to mention some of the rhetorical devices that you are going to talk about later in your essay. And then within each body paragraph, you're talking about the rhetorical device that's the center of the body paragraph. And then finally, in your conclusion, yeah, you would kind of like you can do a restatement of the introduction. I actually had a great stream about 4 weeks ago, I think, that talked about rhetorical analysis conclusions. So if you need more assistance with conclusions for rhetorical analysis, I'm not going to talk too much about that today. Just go to app.fiveable.me/ap-lang. Actually, I think I can link to it right here. Let me find it. Rhetorical analysis conclusion paragraphs. Whoops. There's a good analysis of what you should do in conclusions. So yeah, this is a good example of how you earn sophistication. So you bring in, and I think Nikki asked, should you generally talk about 3 devices only since we write 3 paragraphs? Quality over quantity anytime. It's better to have less devices and more development than more devices and less development. So in this instance, I always wrote about 3 to 4 devices because I had the time to, and I thought I could develop it well. But I think even 2 devices will be good enough as long as they're very developed. And so remember, I think sophistication, you have to be very careful because your devices need to tie into your thesis, remember, because that's how you earn evidence and commentary points, by mentioning why did the author use the device, how does it contribute to their purpose, and then linking back to your broad thesis. But also you need to tie it into the context to earn sophistication. So remember, tying into your thesis and your context is really a sure, fast way to earn sophistication. Alrighty, let's look at another example. So in the first paragraph here, we see a historical context again. However, in the speech, she urges her audience to seek out problems that will exist in the world and to help fix them, but referencing the efforts of marginalized women who are fighting to make a difference, utilizing. So here we see that she urges her audience to seek out problems that exist in the world and to help fix them. And so that's not something that's explicitly stated in the text. It's analysis. It's also greater context of 1997. So that's a good example of that kind of context you need to bring up. And then later, in the first paragraph even, they talk about this broader context. And finally, in the conclusion, they bring up determination, the power women have to elevate their status around the world, and importance of never settling. So that kind of ties back into seeking out problems and fix them. So as you can see, I didn't show a body paragraph here since it wasn't explicit, but bringing it up in the intro, the body paragraph, and the conclusion, that's the most effective way at earning sophistication under this category. Anika asks, how many quotes should we use? That's a great question. It depends, once again, on how many devices you think will be most effective in answering your problem. Sometimes I use like 2 quotes for 1 device. Sometimes I use 1 quote for 1 device. Do whatever your teacher has told you is the best way to write rhetorical analysis. Just do what you're comfortable with. And I guess that's the only best answer I can give. Alrighty. I'm counting quotes of evidence and paraphrase of evidence, if that makes sense. So sometimes I will choose to quote and sometimes I will choose to paraphrase evidence if, like, for instance, using quotes is just too difficult. Nikki asked, how many sentences of commentary should we have for each rhetorical choice? And Anika answered about 5 to 6 total. I would say that, I've read in some places that you should have a 1-to-2 ratio of evidence to commentary. I think you need to be careful not to have repetitive commentary that is simply restating, interpreting, or summarizing, because summary is death. And so basically, you want to have very developed commentary. And oftentimes, I think answering those 2 questions of why did the author use the device and how does it contribute to their purpose and how does it link to context, those 3 questions, that will, help provide sentences of commentary. And Anika, 5 to 6 total quotes. If that works for you, then keep on doing it. If you can do that in 45 minutes, more props to you. Great job. Okay, let's talk about the second category. So we can also look at the purpose or function of the passage's complexities and tensions. So as you can see here, I have that rhetorical situation here of the subject, the writer, the reader. And essentially, what College Board says is that you basically need to find contradictions or complexities within the text and talk about why the author chose to include them. Kind of talk about the function, the purpose. And this is a little bit more difficult because it requires kind of that, more than surface level area of thinking, because you have to ask yourself, what part of this passage is complex? Where are the tensions? Where are the contradictions? Things like that. And so there are a few ways that I've seen this achieved on the actual exam. And I also bring up vivid and persuasive style here. As Perla said, this is another category. You can impress the AP reader with persuasion and vividness. There's not really a template for this at all. Like, I can't tell you to put it in the beginning, middle, and end. Make sure that you don't have grammatical or syntactical issues. I don't know if that's a word even. And I've seen it called like a fairy point. It's very rare. It's very hard to find in a good essay. So oftentimes, it's kind of hard to say how you can get vivid and persuasive style. Alrighty, so now I'm going to show a few examples of how other students got the sophistication point under these other two categories. So here, what we saw is that they actually got elements of the first and second category. So they shared significance of the rhetorical choices, and they also demonstrated the purpose or function of complexities. And for those of you who were actually here in the rhetorical analysis conclusion stream, I actually used this guy's or girl's sample conclusion paragraph, because it was really, really effective. So here we can see that he starts calling, he says Gandhi applies a conciliatory yet forceful tone. He reassures the British of nonviolence, but conveys a sense of urgency. He evokes a sense of imperative yet polite force. So we can see here that his use of adjective yet adjective, and kind of setting up this contrast between how Gandhi and his audience have a complex relationship, that shows the purpose of complexities, but it also shows the significance of the rhetorical choices. It's significant that his tone is conciliatory and respectful, yet has that kind of urgency in backing. And so therefore, by, kind of talking about the sense of guilt and responsibility in the British here in the last body paragraph, that's an example of how you can talk about complexities and the significance of rhetorical choices. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the chat box. You don't need to ask them and ask a question just because we have a little smaller audience size today. It's not too big. And in this essay, they actually got the last two categories. So remember, with sophistication, you only need one of the three categories, but having two or more is often beneficial. So in this instance, they discussed how the passage's complexity support Gandhi's purpose. So here we can see that they talk about how Gandhi sort of had this theme of heroism. He, in this instance, is standing up to the British government, but also asserts they are necessary for the victories of truth to prevail. That kind of touches on complexity here. We can see that he has a desire to make the British see the wrong that they have done to India, but not to harm the British. So these kinds of contradictions and complexities. And finally, here we see him talk about how Gandhi makes Indian resistance seem inevitable. And so that's pretty important, because you kind of emphasize how tens of thousands are going to protest with him here in that last paragraph, in paragraph 4. And there's a lot of persuasion too, right? We can see that this guy's style, or this girl, once again, has just really, really effective writing. When they say stuff like, Gandhi's focus on using an equal love for your people with mine serves to demonstrate the peaceful nature of his protest, and also highlights the wrongdoing. So we can see here that there is a lot of kind of contrasts that are set up throughout, and different sentence structure, and that just makes this person's writing very, very effective. Anna asks, is it going to be penalized if you use Google Docs spell check or free grammar checkers? Good question. College Board said that they're going to let you kind of test how to write the actual essays in late April, or sorry, it might have been early May. So that question, I don't think they would. I don't even know if you'd be able to use a grammar. I've heard that you're able to type in a Google Doc and then paste it over. So that probably is a benefit. Yeah, I don't think they will penalize you. Same difference. Okay, and here, sort of the same thing here. This person earned sophistication because, they had elements of purpose and function of complexities, and also convincing prose style. So ultimately, I think this might be a duplicate slide. It's time to practice. So we're going to spend the last 10-ish minutes or so, in addition to answering questions, practicing the best technique for sophistication. So what you would use after reading that prompt, what do you think you would pursue with sophistication? And I'm actually going to survey the 18 people here right now. Would y'all be interested in writing a full rhetorical analysis essay and then getting feedback from me and the other AP teachers, like writing a full essay and then having us grade it? 12 yeses. So an overwhelming majority said yes. Alrighty. Well, then I'll definitely look into it. And what I'll do is I have y'all's emails attached to this Fiveable link. So probably look for an email from me either tonight or tomorrow, and that's where you'll get a link to our practice prompt. And yeah, we'll give y'all some feedback, and it looks like we have like over 15 people who want to write rhetorical analysis essays, which would make an AP Lang teacher so happy because you'll never see that in classrooms usually. So yeah, we'll definitely make this happen. And I will be probably looking at some of those prompts on my own. And I very much expect y'all to include sophistication, because otherwise, why else would you come to my live review? So make sure whenever you write your prompts to include sophistication, all right? Okay, so let's go through 4 prompts. And basically, I just want you to answer in the chat. We're not going to talk about like vivid, persuasive prose style, but we're either going to talk about the significance or relevance of writers' rhetorical choices or the purpose or function of complexities and tensions. So what I'm actually going to abbreviate it as is significance of choices and purpose of complexities. So basically, or you know what? I think I can abbreviate this: SOC versus POC. So I'm gonna show a prompt. I'm gonna have y'all read it, and then I want you to kind of give me one of those 2 categories, which sophistication technique you would use, either the significance of the writer's rhetorical choices or the purpose of the passage's complexities and tensions. Tell me either SOC, POC, and then give me an explanation why. All right. And this should be a pretty crazy time in terms of, I think I'll see some different responses. Okay, so this is our first prompt. I'm going to link to it in the chat. Go to page 11, and yeah, I'll give y'all about 5 minutes to read through the prompt. And yeah, in the meantime, I'm actually going to go grab some water because my throat is getting very dry. In this instance, I think there is a correct answer per se, but I think you can argue both. Okay, that's time. So everyone in the chat mostly answered, they basically all answered POC here, which I called purpose of complexities. So here we saw Barry contrasts uncertainty with certainties, relating scientists to many different ideas, conveys main abstract message, discuss the contrast between uncertainty and certainty. The quote where he says, everything on the second page indicates a casual tone, juxtaposition between uncertainty and certainty, one main message with different ways to connect and emphasize the point. Great job, everybody. And yeah, first paragraph is like very self-explanatory in that certainty, uncertainty contrast. And later on, you'll even see how he talks about how, if the researcher, like scientists can't deal comfortably with uncertainty sometimes, et cetera, et cetera. Good job. All right, let's do the next one. And let me send y'all the link. This one is on page 10. Was there a way to defend SOC, Shannon? Yeah, I would say that you can always talk about significance of choices. You can say that Barry's earlier use of juxtaposition was significant because in that time, science was, I don't know, like developing and people were questioning it, things like that. Bringing in context, that's a way that you can always defend SOC. So here, would you use SOC, significance of choices, significance or relevance, which means relevance kind of ties into context. So would you use SOC or POC? Once again, 3 minutes. And actually, I think for this one, rather than justifying why one works better than the other, kind of talk about the ways that you would do it. So explain how you would pursue SOC or POC. Okay, cool. So I agree with the consensus here that you should probably use SOC. I saw Perla here say that there is a lot of events and connections to real world topics that can be expanded on to explain significance. Great answer. The writers explaining how tech is taking over nature. I'd be careful about that because that's kind of the thesis. The thesis statement is asking you to develop your argument about the separation between people and nature. So in order to earn sophistication, you got to do a little bit more beyond that. Same with Page here. He said examples brought in to defend the author's point. I think examples, that's like technically a device per se, but you've kind of got to talk about significance and relevance and context, those like zinger words are the way that you can kind of bring your writing to another level. I see here that Nikki said the author provides quotes from these two people. Yeah, I would say that those two people are good examples of evidence and commentary, but not quite to the point of sophistication. You've got to touch more, but how it is significant and or relevant. And so, yeah, same with like Susan, rhetorical choices and personal anecdote. Those are great rhetorical devices that y'all kind of pointed out. And I think they're definitely helpful, but I think to develop sophistication, you have to tell me why those choices matter or how are they relevant in some context. I see here that Shannon talked about the violence of the war that was pursued through like architecture. I think that's a good example. And I think that's a good example where you could take sophistication. But I think what you have to be careful about is that you want your contextualization or your sophistication to be very broad. It needs to be inclusive of elements from the beginning, the middle paragraphs, and the end paragraphs of your text. So maybe going a little bit more big picture would be more effective. Amani said, I'm having trouble defending why I would. Wouldn't SOC count for general commentary though and not sophistication? So remember, SOC stands for significance of choices. It doesn't talk. So I think we've got to talk about the difference here, because I think I might have been a little bit confusing, and that's on me, not on you. So what I meant by significance of choices is the significance in terms of the rhetorical situation. So think back to Gandhi. Think back to Albright, those two that we just went over, about how women were not able to vote. They didn't have a lot of rights. They definitely weren't in the workplace. In terms of Gandhi, we saw that the British weren't allowing them to get independence. There wasn't a lot of sovereignty. Those kinds of pieces of information, right, were not in the text. And in this instance, whenever we talk about general commentary, that is just linking back to your thesis. Here we're talking about linking back to a greater big picture that extends beyond the text. So it could talk about something in life, it could talk about something in history, something like that. That's what I mean by SOC. Significance and relevance of choices. Does that make sense? If you need me to clarify, Anika, I'd be happy to. If we related the examples to the big picture, yeah, Grace, that's where you get sophistication. Sophistication is by taking those examples, by taking rhetorical questions, by taking examples, by taking quotes from authors and saying that's important and that links to some context, that links to some event, some development, right? Talking about something bigger than the text. Anna said, please clarify. Can you elaborate on SOC? Yeah, I'd love to. So what I mean by SOC, so we can go back to the rubric and to my slide about significance of choices. So let's look at an example of significance of choices. Here, right, we see that Albright urges her audience to seek out problems that still exist in the world, and she highlights the need for determination, the power women have to elevate their status. And she you see here that they talk about powerful diction and references to American efforts. So that powerful diction links to how women are able to seek out problems that still exist in the world, right? With the Gandhi paragraph, over here, they talked about nonviolence and urgency, and that linked to that kind of the tone here. So we can see that the conciliatory yet forceful tone contributed to the significance of reassuring the British, kind of evoking that imperative and polite force. And so I guess that's the best way that I kind of talk about SOC. Does that make a little bit more sense? Yeah, kind of light bulbs going off. And I think your teachers might be talking about sophistication in a different way than I am. And I think even there's a teacher in here. Hello. And so, do what your teachers have been giving you sophistication points on first and foremost. If, you haven't been taught this, I would encourage you to think about SOC and POC, because I think those are good ways to measure sophistication, whether you are linking to a broader significance outside of the text or talking about complexities and tensions. All right, let's go to number 3 here. Or I think this is the last one. And it seems like I didn't link it. and that's on me. Did we do this one already? Yeah, let me find it. And yeah, Nikki, I think that works, where you're, signifying experiences from the author's generation. But I think you need to go even more beyond that, saying that during the 19 somethings or during that time period, this and this and this occurred, something like that. Let me find this prompt. Sorry, I guess I didn't link it in my slides. And there we go, 2009. This is our last slide of today, last practice. And it should be on page 12 of the PDF. It's talking about, this is a paired passage, actually. It's very exciting. Anika asks, how do you find POC? I'm going to answer that after letting read in silence for 3 minutes. So enjoy. For those of you who just joined, I saw a few popped in. Right now, we're just practicing our sophistication technique. It's completely optional as to whether you want to write a sophistication paragraph. Just asking you to choose whether you would write a sophistication argument by using significance of choices. So I'm abbreviating that as SOC, or POC, which is purpose of complexities. Significance of choices has to do with kind of a greater context, the broad significance that the rhetorical choices tie into, and purpose of complexities just talks about why the author decided to, include tensions or complexities, and that's abbreviated as POC. Just answer in the chat, SOC or POC, why. Got about 30-ish seconds or so. And there's not like a right or wrong answer to this one either. And in this case, I would say that reading that introduction paragraph right before the two prompts, very, very important. Alrighty, so let's look at what y'all said. So the first thing I would like to point out is that Wilson is satirizing the languages of two groups. He's not using both as, evidence for and against. He is trying to illustrate the unproductive nature of such discussions. So when I read y'all's answers, make sure that you're talking about the unproductive nature of discussions, whether it's environmentalists or critics of the environmental movement who are advocating for economic growth, that kind of stuff. So let's look through. POC, the author seems to contradict himself throughout by arguing what's best for the environment and saying how he cares. That's not necessarily what they're trying to do. Remember, they're quote unquote contradicting himself simply to try and illustrate how both sides are kind of crazy. They're both unwilling to listen to each other and seek compromise. So Amani here says that the author uses rhetorical choices. So once again, I think that's more so an evidence and commentary aspect. Talking about sophistication means how would you tie this text to a greater context, or talk about how maybe he's trying to achieve something while doing this and this. So doing two opposing things to complete some purpose. So we saw that with the Gandhi passage earlier, where Gandhi was both, very, I guess, polite, but also forceful. Nikki answered within the 1950s and 60s, people didn't have the technology that existed. So they found, this is from the last one. Got it. New technological devices arrive in our hands in the blink of the eye. Yeah, I would say that this is on your way to sophistication, especially if you're including that right before the thesis. I would just caution you, Nikki, that you should not just do this. I would say that in order to kind of, secure your sophistication point per se, to also tie in technology or tie in entertainment through nature in your body paragraphs. Sierra says POC, I'm not sure why. Susan says the author is backing his argument with both sides, pro and anti-environmentalism perspectives. And so once again, that's not necessarily what he's trying to do here. And Anna here says Wilson is opposing two different groups of people, not one large group. That's very important. So I think that's something that we could really, I think that's really the summary of how I would pursue POC in this article. In 2002, you could, sorry, that's SOC. In POC, the purpose of complexities, you can say that they are, including arguments from both sides intentionally to demonstrate how both have flaws and to kind of advance his argument that, simply put, both groups are just too extreme. And yeah, use of satire and its significance, that's very POCE. POCY. Complexities are used within and between the two passages, emphasize the importance of ridiculousness, use of satire to create a tension. It's kind of like the world today with politics. I think that's a great example of how you can use SOC. In this instance, I think I would use significance because I think, the purpose of complexities here, it's kind of just like there. So I think I would actually do a mix. I would also touch on how in 2002, we saw that the ozone layer was shrinking. People were like freaking out. And so there were overreactions on both sides, and that's what led to political gridlock, which we still see today, kind of what Grace is saying. So do you see that kind of SOC logic I just explained right there, where I'm talking about what happened in 2002 and also tying it into what's happening now? Democrats and Republicans despise each other. They will refuse to compromise on most things, whether that's tax policy, healthcare. And so we see that beyond just environmentalism. We see that in social issues. And so that's how I would tie in the author's rhetorical choices of, satire and contrasting the two groups to make them look ridiculous to modern day politics, to modern day kind of events. Does that make sense, everybody? Yeah. Okay, great. Well, that is everything I had for today. Make sure that you follow Fiveable on all of our social media, including TikTok. And yeah, I'll stay here and answer questions for about 2 minutes. Yes, I think it's perfectly okay to bring in current events as long as you tie it to context. You don't want to distract. You want to build on your argument. So let me be very clear. Your argument should be pretty focused on rhetorical choices, why the author made them, and how it contributes to their purpose. But by bringing in a modern day context, by bringing in maybe some current events or some historical events, it strengthens your argument. Okay. Amani said, I'm overwhelmed and confused because I had AP Lang at the beginning of my school year up until January, and we only practiced writing the argument essay. I'm so sorry that happened. Usually, I think teachers start with rhetorical analysis and end with argument. And because that's the case, if you have 3 hours, I don't know how to say this, or 3 to 4 hours, Amani, in the next few weeks, what I would highly recommend is that you go to app.fiveable.me/aplang. Actually, I'm going to link you to rhetorical analysis. Here you go. Okay, I'm going to link you, Amani, to this. Sorry. Here you go. Okay, I'm a little conflicted because I've been focused on my other essays. I don't think I've ever written a rhetorical analysis essay. Do you think signing up for the Cram Pass would be beneficial for me? Amani, I think signing up for the Cram Pass is important, but here's the thing. If it's a financial burden on you, if it's something that you don't think you can afford, A, you can apply for financial aid too. But B, if it's something that you don't want to be, if you don't think is necessary, then we have plenty of free reviews that you can definitely go watch. But I think Stephanie Kirk, or Miss Kirk, as Perla said, it is a fantastic resource. So yeah, I'm actually going to join y'all at that bio review because I'm a little bit lost with self-communication. I'll see y'all later, and I'll definitely email y'all with some resources, especially that new practice prompt. Bye, guys.